I will tell you what happened to us out there, in the space between the spiral arms where the stars thin out and the dark stretches on forever. I will tell you because I think every species in the galaxy needs to hear it. Not as a warning, as a promise. My name is Vaelith Sorinar. I am Mirathan, and I was the junior navigation officer aboard the deep survey vessel Quiet Passage, 19 crew. 46 days into a mapping mission through what the Galactic Union calls the Abyssal Corridor, which is a polite name for a region of space where nothing lives, nothing grows, and no one comes looking for you if something goes wrong. We were alone, and we had been alone for a long time. You need to understand something about my species to understand what that kind of isolation does to us. The Mirathan communicate partly through light. Our skin carries bioluminescent patterns that shift with our moods, our thoughts, our connections to each other. When we are happy, we glow. When we are together and safe, our light synchronizes, pulses in shared rhythms like a conversation without words. But when we are cut off, when the loneliness settles in, we begin to dim. It is not something we can control, it simply happens, the way a flower closes when the sun disappears. By day 46, the crew of the Quiet Passage had grown dim. We still did our work. We still spoke to each other in measured, professional tones. But the light in our skin had faded to almost nothing, and no one talked about it, because talking about it would have meant admitting how far from home we really were. Then the drive failed. It was not a gradual decline, or a repairable malfunction. The Cascade drive that allowed us to cross the vast distances between stars relied on a crystal lattice, a delicate and irreplaceable structure, grown in orbital facilities over the course of months. That lattice shattered. I heard it from the navigation bay. A single high, clean note, like something precious falling from a great height and breaking on the floor. Our chief engineer, Terevon, came to the bridge to deliver his assessment. His skin was almost completely dark, which meant he was holding back emotions he did not want the rest of us to see. He told us the drive was not damaged, it was gone. We could not fix it. We could not build a new lattice with the tools we had. On conventional thrust alone, the nearest port was centuries away. Captain Ilaren stood very still for a long time after he finished speaking. Then she asked the question we were all thinking. Can anyone reach us? The answer, by every reasonable calculation, was no. The nearest Galactic Union relay station was 11 standard days away, at communication speed. The Union's official rescue doctrine classified the Abyssal Corridor as non-recoverable space, which meant that ships lost here were mourned, recorded, and forgotten. No patrols, no outposts, no one listening. We had 31 days of breathable air and drinkable water. After that, the Quiet Passage would become a tomb, drifting through empty space until the stars themselves burned out. Captain Ilaren ordered me to activate the distress beacon. I asked her, respectfully, what she expected to accomplish. She looked at me with her light flickering in that stubborn, quiet way she had, and she said that civilized people call out even when no one is listening. Because silence is surrender, and she was not ready to surrender. So I composed the signal. Vessel identification, crew count, coordinates, nature of failure, estimated life support duration. I sent it on every standard Union frequency. Then, because the communications manual required it, I cycled through every registered species-specific emergency band. Most of them belonged to civilizations whose territory was impossibly far from our position. I sent the signal anyway, one by one into the void. One of the frequencies on the list was 243.0 MHz, registered to the Terrans. Humans. I almost skipped it. They were a relatively young species on the galactic stage, and their territory was nowhere near the corridor. Including their frequency felt pointless, like tossing a pebble into an ocean and hoping it would reach the other shore. But the manual said every frequency, so I sent it. The signal disappeared into the dark, and we began to wait. I started rationing my water. I watched my crewmates grow dimmer. I tried not to think about 31 days. 72 minutes later, my console activated. Not a relay ping, not an automated acknowledgement bouncing back from some distant satellite. A voice. A living voice, speaking my language so badly that I almost did not recognize it. The pronunciation was wrong, the harmonic structure was a mess, and the accent made every word sound like it was being chewed before it was spoken. But I understood it. Mirathan vessel, Quiet Passage, This is the Terran Rapid Response Ship Abilene. We have your signal. We are coming. Hold position. Estimated arrival, 14 hours. How copy? I sat there staring at the console with my hands frozen above the controls. I did the math. The signal had been traveling for 72 minutes. That meant the humans were either already inside the corridor, or so close to its edge that they had entered it the moment they heard us. No one patrols the corridor. No one is ever in the corridor, except, apparently, the humans. I managed to respond. My voice was shaking, and my skin was doing something it had not done in weeks. It was glowing, bright, uncontrollable pulses of white and blue racing across my arms and face. Copy, Abilene. We copy. When I relayed the message to the bridge, Captain Ilaran asked me to repeat it. I did. She stared at me. Then her skin flared so brightly that it lit up the entire bridge, a burst of blue-white radiance that she could not suppress no matter how hard she tried. Around her, one by one, the rest of the crew began to glow. Hope looks like light among my people. And for the first time in weeks, the quiet passage was shining. During the 14 hours we waited, I did something I had never thought to do before. I pulled up everything our cultural database had on humans. I needed to understand what kind of species hears a stranger calling from the darkest corner of the galaxy and answers within 72 minutes. What I found changed the way I see the universe. Humans maintain something they call the Coast Guard Doctrine. It is an ancient principle, older than their spacefaring civilization, older even than most of their nations. It states that any distress call, from any vessel, of any origin, in any territory, must be answered. This is not a law. Their laws came later. This principle comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath language and government and reason. They consider it part of what they are. Their ships carry more emergency supplies and medical equipment than any species of comparable technology. Not for themselves, for whoever they might find along the way. They are one of the only species that regularly patrol dead zones and non-sovereign space, not to claim territory, but to look for people in trouble. The Galactic Union has formally asked them to stop entering non-recoverable zones twice. The humans formally agreed both times. They never stopped. I sat with this information for a long time, turning it over in my mind. The Mirathan are considered a compassionate species. It is our reputation, our pride. But I realized, sitting there in the dim light of a dying ship, that compassion and action are not the same thing. My people would have mourned us. We would have been remembered beautifully, ceremonially, with great sadness and sincerity. But no Mirathan ship would have come. The humans did not mourn us. They simply refused to let us be lost. 14 hours and 6 minutes after the response, the Abilene dropped out of what humans call hard translation, their version of faster-than-light travel, and appeared in our viewport. It was not a beautiful ship. I want to be honest about that. It was blunt-nosed, scarred, covered in hull patches and external cargo pods that looked like they had been bolted on by someone in a hurry. It had no elegance, no symmetry, no grace. It looked like it had been dragged through every rough edge in the galaxy and kept flying through sheer stubbornness. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Commander Ren Delacroix hailed us. Her voice was calm, unhurried, steady, in a way that made me believe she had done this many times before. She asked for a full status report, crew injuries, and atmospheric composition, so her team could adjust their equipment. Captain Ilaran, trying very hard to maintain her diplomatic composure, asked why a Terran vessel was anywhere near the abyssal corridor. "We patrol out here," Delacroix said. "There is nothing out here," Ilaran replied. "Yeah," the human said. "That is why we patrol it." The boarding team arrived shortly after. 6 humans in heavy work suits, carrying what seemed like far too much equipment. I had never seen a human in person before, and I will admit, they startled me. They were loud. They moved with a constant, restless energy, as if their bodies could not tolerate stillness. They talked over each other, laughed at things that were not funny, and one of them, a large engineer everyone called Mackie, crawled directly into our drive housing and began scolding our broken engine, the way you might scold a pet that had misbehaved. Their medic, Corporal Adin Reyes, examined every member of our crew individually. He adjusted his scanner for Mirathan physiology on the spot, calibrating it between patients with a practiced ease that amazed me. When I asked how a human medic knew our biology, he shrugged and said, "We study everybody, just in case." I watched them work. They were not graceful. They argued, they made a mess. They ate ration bars that smelled truly terrible. But they never stopped moving, never stopped working. They shared their own water and air supply without being asked, and without keeping track of how much they gave away. I noticed a small patch on each of their uniform sleeves, a circle containing a hand reaching downward. I asked Reyes what it meant. He looked at it as if he had forgotten it was there. "It means we pull people up," he said. Mackie could not repair our Cascade drive. The crystal lattice was beyond saving. But he and his team did something I would not have believed possible. They physically connected the Abilene secondary drive to our propulsion frame using a set of universal adapters they carried specifically for this purpose. They called it a buddy tow. They had a name for it. They had practiced it. They carried the equipment for it as standard inventory, because to them, finding a stranded ship was not a question of if, but when. The journey to the nearest relay station took 6 days. During that time, I found myself sitting in the corridor outside the engine room, across from Commander Delacroix. We talked, and I finally asked her the question that had been burning inside me since the moment her voice came through my console. Why? Not just why did you come? Why does your entire species build itself around the idea that strangers will need saving? She was quiet for a while. Then she told me about Earth. About oceans so vast that ancient humans could not see across them. About wooden ships and storms that swallowed them whole. About a time before technology, before rescue coordination, before satellites and radios, when the only thing standing between a drowning sailor and death was another sailor willing to row into the storm. She told me about lighthouse keepers who spent their lives on cold rocks guiding ships to safety. About lifeboat crews who launched into waves that could end them because someone out there in the dark was calling for help. We were alone for a long time, she said. On our little world, in our little ocean, and when someone was drowning, the only people who could help were other people. So we helped. We built that into ourselves so deep that we carried it with us to the stars. She looked at me, and her expression was not proud or boastful. It was simply certain. The galaxy is just a bigger ocean, and we will never stop rowing. When the Abilene delivered us to Relay Station Oreth 4, our crew gathered at the viewport as the two ships separated. Our bioluminescence had returned, not fully, but enough. We pulsed together in unison, a Marethan expression of gratitude so deep that it does not translate well into words. The closest I can come is this: we will carry your light with us for as long as we live. Delacroix asked me over the comms what the light display meant. I told her. There was a pause, and when her voice came back, it was just slightly unsteady, in a way I do not think she intended. "That is real kind of you, Quiet Passage. Fair winds." Then the Abilene turned and headed back into the dark. Not toward home, not toward port or rest or recognition. Back into the corridor, back into the nothing, where the stars thin out and the void stretches on and on forever. Where no one goes, where humans go, just in case. I am home now. I have filed my official report. It is dry, factual, and professional, exactly as the Admiralty expects. But this document, the one you are reading now, is my personal record. I am writing it because I need the galaxy to understand something. I used to believe that the universe was cold. I used to believe that the emptiness between stars was proof that we are all, in the end, alone. I do not believe that anymore. Not because the void is any less vast. It is still enormous. It is still dark. It is still terrifying. But somewhere inside it, a species I had never met heard my voice and came running. The humans have many sayings. I have learned quite a few of them now, and most are crude or confusing, or both. But there is one I carry with me, written on a small piece of paper that Corporal Reyes pressed into my hand as his team left our ship. I did not read it until they were gone. It said 5 words: "We answer every call." And they do.